Angeles, Orange County. Welcome everybody to the Los Angeles Orange County Alumni Club virtual roundtable for University of Chicago. I want to welcome all of the alumni from Chicago booth, but also I know that we have some alumni from some of our sister clubs in the LA MBA network, so welcome to you as well. So just a bit about the format. This is the first time we're doing it, so please have a little patience with us in case we run into any technical difficulties. But we have a group of panelists, so you can see on the screen here. And then everybody else is going to be on mute. Just note that that's how it's going to work. And we want to make this interactive, right? So the way to do that would be if you have a question or want to make a comment or whatever, you can either use the chat button or the raise your hand tool, and then we'll kind of monitor that throughout the conversation this afternoon and get your questions in. I think the one other point I wanted to make is that we know that right now it's a very dynamic and challenging time for everybody. And so everybody's in kind of a different place. And so we respect that. We've been looking for a way to get together virtually in this new environment. And so we're going to try this format and hopefully it works well for us. So just in terms of, I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Mike Vermillion. I'm co-president of our alumni group here in Los Angeles. I work in Westlake Village, California. I live in Simi Valley, California. I work for a company called JD Power. I lead a couple of our business units there. I cover travel and hospitality, also our customer service practice. And then just in terms of how we see this flowing this afternoon, we've got a group of great panelists who are industry leaders, all Chicago booth grads, and they're in different industries. And so it's going to be really interesting to see their point of view in terms of where we are in the current environment and how they're thinking about things going forward. So we've got some seed questions that we'll ask, and then we want to definitely open it up to Q&A. So we'll go about an hour, and hopefully this works well for everybody. Just before we dive into introducing our panelists and the topic, quick ad for our group. I moved out to Los Angeles in 2015 and from the East Coast, and found that there were a lot of activities to do in Los Angeles, but the quality was kind of all over the place. And so really happy that I found the booth alumni group, and have been quite active in it in the past 18 months, 24 months. And just a couple of the things that we've done. I think the way I would describe it to people would be that by belonging to and actively participating in the booth alumni group, you're getting kind of this ticket to behind the scenes access to some really cool stuff. And so we've had some great fireside chats with, for example, Scott Adelson at Houlihan Lokey and Howard Marks at Oaktree and Michael Armstrong at Paramount. We've done some cool events like the Jack Daniels event, which I can't remember the name of, probably because of the Jack Daniels. But also the Magic Castle event and some guys fighting at a hockey game. So that's just a small subset of the things that we've done, and I've gotten a lot out of it. I would encourage you to keep an eye out for upcoming activities, and it's really you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So that's the ad for the group. So now I want to introduce our panelists. So panelists, what I'd like to do is everybody can kind of read your bio here, but maybe just your connection to booth, what part of town you live in, and kind of what industry you're representing today. So for example, I'm Mike Vermillion. I'm up in Ventura County, actually on the LA County, Ventura County line in Westlake, representing market research. So Diana, why don't we go to you next?
Hey everyone, I'm Diana. I live in Los Angeles. I am class of 2015 from the full-time program, and I will be representing the health tech industry.
Thanks, Diana. I actually forgot. I did graduate from Booth. It was 1990. It's a long time ago that we were missing out on our 30-year reconnect, and we had big plans for that. But anyhow, that's life. John.
Hello, everyone. John Rhodes. I'm going to be representing cannabis specifically, but more broadly, the startup world and food and beverage, consumer packaged goods. I'm a 2006 Booth grad, and I live in the Westwood neighborhood, which has been very quiet since they kind of shut down UCLA.
So thanks, John. Let's see, Will, why don't we go to you next?
Sure. Will DeGroot. I'm a 2008 graduate of the Executive MBA program. I've got to sit back so you don't lose my head. I am representing, I think, biotech and a little bit of finance as well here today. And of course, glad that everybody's willing to tune in and hopefully has a cocktail at home while they're watching me on TV.
Okay, terrific. And we have another panelist, Chris, who hopefully will be joining us shortly. Chris is raising his hand. And so let's see, hang on a second. Okay, here's Chris, and I'm going to allow you to talk. Chris, did that work?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, perfect.
Great.
All right. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties here, but so I'm Chris Howland, class of 2014. I'm an entertainment banker with Torrey Pines Bank, so I'll be representing entertainment, but also specifically speaking to the
Okay, Chris, I think we maybe missed that last piece there, but we'll come back to you. So the idea for this panel is to get some thoughts from industry leaders who are Booth. There we go. Hey, Chris. To get perspective from industry leaders around Los Angeles who are Booth grads from different industries. Focus for this week will be on small business and healthcare. And we do have some more webinars we're going to do in this series, and we'll talk more about that, at the end when we finish up. So panelists, why don't we, to kind of kick this off, just describe a little bit about the pandemic and the economic environment and how that's kind of affected your business, and then we'll come back with some follow-up questions. So Diana, why don't we start with you, please?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I work at GoodRx. For those that don't know what or have never used GoodRx, the short of it is we are a website and free app for anyone to use. We make it transparent to show you how much you can expect to pay for medication at the pharmacy before you go there. And as of like a month ago, we also launched the first ever telehealth marketplace. So in a similar fashion, we show you how much you can expect to pay for a medical appointment via televideo with healthcare providers. So to answer the question, what's been really remarkable is with this pandemic, what we saw early on is people started to refill their prescriptions to 90-day fills. So back in March, when the pandemic got its height, everyone was asked to stay home. That's where we saw the most fills coming in. What's changed since this is that people are no longer seeing their doctors as much. They're not going into the doctor's office, so they're not getting as many new prescriptions. So we are seeing a little bit of an impact in that sense, where people just aren't getting new prescriptions to fill at the pharmacy. What has been really exciting, though, is, like I mentioned, we launched the telehealth marketplace. And so this has really put at consumers and patients' fingertips the opportunity to see a healthcare provider still. What was actually really interesting is in the beginning, we did launch a free COVID-19 screening. So this was a free service that anyone could use, and it helped people decide if they should get tested or seek medical help as the next step for this virus.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think that GoodRx has really done some cool things there with the initially the screening where you could you actually talk to a healthcare professional, or was it more of a chat function, or?
Yeah, you can actually get a video chat. So for those that have used GoodRx or haven't on the prescription side, so what you do is you type in the name of your medication, or in this case, you locate the condition that you have, and then you are shown a list of providers as well as the cost that it would be to see these providers. And so this is in comparison to your insurance, if you have insurance, or for those that don't have insurance or high deductible healthcare plans. This is one way for the patients to be savvy consumers, so they can really make the decision themselves, which option will be most cost effective for them to get either the medical service they need or the medication they need.
Great, thanks, Diana. Hey, well, why don't we continue with the healthcare theme? I suppose in biotech, that this is really kind of maybe refocused some attention and investment even in terms of where people are putting their efforts, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where depending where you are in your cycle, but let me take a step back. I work for NKMax America, which is a privately held company that's working on cellular therapies, but specifically in the natural killer space. And if you think about what a natural killer cell, it's really a vigilante white blood cell. And so what we try and do is we extract it from an individual, we repurpose it, we expand those natural killer cells and allow you to use your own cells to go back in your body and fight, in our case, cancer. But Mike, you bring up an important point. I think all of us, in the very smart people, which is not me, and the scientists that I work with, they always think about how to use what is naturally focused in cancer or arthritis or in Alzheimer's and say, well, how can we help what's immediately at risk now? And obviously with this pandemic, everybody starts to scratch their heads and figure out what we can do. And so we've actually, though we have to focus very clearly on where we have clinical trials going on in cancer and other, we do think very deeply about how natural killer cells can help with the pandemic. And of course, it's a much longer shot and very early, but we are working with partners to think about how to do that. But again, it does refocus all of us, because I think the people that work in these types of industries, I think, can very directly impact patients in need. And so if nothing else, we sort of create, some more thinking that then gets pushed back to academia to say, hey, listen, have you thought about this? And then from academia, it goes to the bedside. And that coordination and that passion to help patients in need, especially this pandemic, I think is certainly of value.
Great, thanks, Will. Hey, Chris, why don't we go to you next to get kind of the banker's point of view, especially from a small business perspective, and what's changed up for you and your bank, and how are things going in terms of the lending programs?
It's been night and day from just about a month or two ago. So if you all recall, from the beginning of March, when the virus really became a prevalent focus on the news. It was, basically Congress rushed to basically to cut off, the hurt that, small businesses were feeling, because ultimately, this virus, was sort of an artificial stop to the economy. Everyone was told all of a sudden to shelter in place, but we realized that, that sort of artificial stop could do a lot of damage to small businesses. So the idea is, while all these companies were sheltering in place and their sources of revenue were cut off, they needed some sort of lifeline to stay in business, continue paying their employees, keep everyone, employed as opposed to furloughed. So Congress passed the CARES Act at probably the last day of March. And really, from, the program rolled out, I think, a couple of days later. It was a little rocky to start off, just because really rules are being made on the fly, and, applications are being filled out, and then expectations were changing. But all in all, it was, the first rollout was very successful. Our bank was able to fund, I think, about $1.5 billion worth of loans. Because I was fairly new to the bank and had joined in January, I just volunteered and put my hand up and said, listen, I want to do whatever I can to help, get these, loan applications through. I'm an entertainment banker, but my loans focused on, like, the first one was a synagogue, law firm, CPA firm, real estate firm, restaurants, car washes, you name it. I mean, all sorts of businesses were qualifying, and we were able to help them. And it was a great experience. Now we're sort of in the midst of the second round. The first round of funding ran out, I think, in about 13 days. And, now I think we're a little over about a week and a half into the second round. And I think, funds will probably run out soon, but, so far so good. I think our major concern, though, is that, right now, I think we're projecting about $1 trillion of additional funding is going to be needed to honor all of the PPP requests. And, we'll see if that, if Congress comes through with that.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hey, just as a reminder, feel free to jump in with questions. Two ways to do that. One would be to just type in the question in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. John, why don't we go to you next? So you're representing the cannabis industry. You're also an entrepreneur, so I suppose representing the startup community. I would imagine that this environment's been quite stressful for the startup community, with especially if you're pre-revenue or pre-break even, right?
Yeah, good assumption. Quite stressful. So, there's what's happening in the cannabis industry, which has been huge disruption, both on what consumers are doing and what they're buying, but also across the whole supply chain. Cannabis sits on a scale somewhere between where you have caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco, into vitamins and supplements, and then into pharmaceuticals in some respect, depending on what type of products you're selling or buying, and why you're buying and using those products. And across all of those industries, there's been huge disruption. People have massively changed their consumer spending habits. I was looking at IRI data the other day. The first week of quarantine, everyone buys toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Second week, they buy canned tuna and corn. And then the third week, they buy boxed brownie mix. So you're having these massive shifts in consumption patterns, and then that has drastic impact back through the supply chain on the producer end. So you're seeing all of that across the cannabis industry right now. We'll get into more details about some of the specifics and the fact that it is an essential business and is still operating. So we are still surviving, at least in California, although it's different in different states and obviously different in different countries. Outside of cannabis, general entrepreneur startup worlds, if you have a company that was reliant on future funding and continuing to burn through money, you're in real trouble right now. And as you said, if you weren't in profitability or in a path to profitability, there's going to be a real extinction event across the whole startup world, whether it's anything, tech, consumer products, physical products. There's a lot of companies that are just going to go away because the investment community has dried up and people aren't going to have the patience for some future profitability plan. And so I'm seeing that in cannabis. I'm seeing that across the whole startup worlds, and a whole kind of revaluation of assets generally, whether that's your brand or your physical manufacturing facilities. And so that's really changed people's planning, both in the long term and in the short term.
Yeah, John, just to springboard off that idea of how has this environment changed how you're thinking about the future, or perhaps more specifically, how are you navigating through the fog? I know that, like in our business at JD Power, we run these massive longitudinal studies where we talk to 2 million consumers a year. And if I want to get a new study up and off the ground, I have to plan out 18 months, 24 months. It's kind of my planning horizon. But with 30 million people unemployed and not really sure what's going to happen next week, our planning horizon is just extremely shortened, and we're just kind of staring at a fog bank right now. So John, maybe start with you, and then we'd love to hear from Will, Chris, and Diana as well. How are you guys thinking about your planning horizon, and how are you navigating through this fog?
Yeah, so in cannabis, I guess a silver lining is that successful companies are super adaptable. We get changing regulations, changing taxation, lot of change in the industry, especially over the last 2 years. So the history over the last 2 years has been adult use full legalization. Not much more than 2 years ago in California, which completely changed everything, and then ramping in of regulations. So, um, you know, my industry, everyone has learned to pivot very quickly, and planning horizons have not been long term. And maybe that's a benefit because there wasn't a lot of wasted work done. All of that being the case, you have to pivot pretty quickly if your long-term plan is not matching up with what the market's going to look like in the future. So just within the last year before COVID, there was a massive repricing of assets and companies. Canadian crown companies dropping from $1 to 10 cents. Tilray being worth more than American Airlines at one point is, American Airlines isn't worth so much now probably, but there was a massive repricing that already happened. There was the vape scare and people moving away from vape products, which were market leader. And so for the long term, it's more a reconsideration if your product still has product market fit. And then that requires some long-term realignment if that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, Diana, at GoodRx, you were able to pivot pretty quickly to get the consultation up and running. You also launched a telemedicine directory or telehealth directory, I suppose. But what are you guys thinking about just in terms of how far out you're looking into the future at this point?
Yeah. So for us, we have an incredible team that was able to push out the telehealth marketplace in, I think, a month earlier than was expected. So they've been working nonstop during this period.
Mm-hmm.
What's been really incredible too is some of the other teams, we have an incredible research arm. So they've been pumping out content, making sure it's grounded in these, studies, CDC, all that stuff. So we want to make sure we continue to be that resource for patients and consumers, right? So whether it's just like blog posts on, what does it mean to stay at home, or if you have symptoms, what are some things that you can do? Quarantine, what does that look like? They've continued to push that out. In addition, when it comes to the telehealth marketplace, what's really incredible and unique about GoodRx is it's an alternative or another option to your insurance or to those that don't have insurance. So in this time, especially for, unfortunately, those that are, losing their jobs or, getting furloughed or whatnot, GoodRx continues to be a really great resource for people because we're very upfront, transparent, kind of like Travelocity, but for prescriptions and telehealth. So people can still see a doctor if they really need to. It's just a different way of doing it. And as we continue to see, right, telehealth just continues to be relevant right now. It's just so opportune. But we also very regularly just continue to monitor how that's evolving. Because obviously, patients also have to think about insurance companies, and when it comes to just reimbursements and co-pays and all that stuff, that's still very relevant when it comes to getting people the healthcare and the medication they need.
Hey, Diana, we have a question that came in for you about regulation or deregulation, I suppose. I know I follow Reason magazine, and one of the drums they've been beating is this idea that we've had to do a lot of deregulation through this crisis to make things happen. And their point is, if we needed to deregulate to make things happen, then what was the point of the regulations to begin with? So I think the question here is, was there some particular deregulation or policy relaxation that helps accelerate what you're doing with telemedicine and telehealth?
Yeah, so there's an incredible team working on that at GoodRx, so I'm not as close to them. What I do know, though, is our legal team, our regulatory team, they work state by state just to make, because every state has their own regulation and their own, way of approving or vetting telehealth services. So it is incredible, just painstaking, state by state effort when it comes to making sure, when we do offer telemedicine at a state, it is checked and vetted by all the proper protocols. We are continuing to add more states when it comes to adding more conditions as well. So we continue to do that. And I think to the question's point of, how is regulation or policy relaxation accelerating this? It's really like kudos to our legal team and everyone on that front for just staying in step as it changes so that we can be there for patients when it's possible for us to do that.
Thanks, Diana. Chris, at the bank, you guys also were able to pivot pretty quickly, right, to jump on the CARES program and help make that happen. But kind of given that, how are you guys thinking about the future and kind of navigating through this fog?
Yeah, I mean, even before the legislation for the CARES Act passed, we were already kind of interacting with the SBA and kind of getting some sort of preliminary guidance. Okay, what's this plan going to look like? What do we have to ask our clients? What sort of material do we have to provide? So we got on it pretty quickly, and I think one of the the strengths for us is that being regional bank, we're about 27 billion total assets. All of our application process was in person, which is become more rare in banking, really kind of interacting with a human being. And so anytime any of our clients had questions, we said, listen, we can hold your hand through the process. We'll tell you what you need to provide, and really it was amazing seeing, my colleagues from my fellow bankers all the way to the back office. People were working on the weekends, all hours. I think I submitted one loan application around midnight on a Saturday. And then, within, 30 minutes, the credit officer had already reviewed it and had approved, the loan. So it was just really an amazing team effort. And, with conditions changing sometimes by the hour in terms of rules and materials. So it was just a tremendous team effort.
Thanks, Chris. Well, what about for your industry? I suppose you guys almost have to take a long-term view, right? Kind of regardless of the current economic environment.
Yeah, I think about it. It is a long-term view, which allows you to focus. But I think about the things that happened most immediately. We had the city the county, Orange County, who actually put out a regulation from the health commissioner, the night when this all hit, shutting down basically every business and not really thinking about specifically biotechnology or essential workers. So within 12 hours after that, the county commissioner comes in and opens up business again, at least for essential workers. And for us, we have a GMP facility here that's building cell lines, which really can't stop, because if it does, then you're not able to prosecute the clinical trials that you have moving forward, which then slows down your pipeline. So, there's the immediate things you have to kind of address. And then there's the making sure, for example, employees are here and they're coming in safe, right? So we're implementing policies, we take temperatures, and those are the short-term things, which again, you want to make sure the employees are safe, and that we can prosecute the long-term stuff, which is of course, making sure that we're responding to investors by hitting the milestones we've set forth, which includes, phase 1, 2A, B trials. And so it is a long-term view of really thinking about those milestones, but everything's become incredibly unique, right? That, I'm strangely enough for everybody, I'm an essential employee. So I'm physically here in this office every day, but what I do is not that science, right? We're communicating with investors, potential investors, thinking about the finances, really trying to figure out how to grow the business. And so it is a long-term view, which actually really, I think, caused us to focus even more so, and to say, okay, here's the notes we have to hit, and here's the things we have to do. And it allows you to sort of push to the side those things that are less important. So it's actually been a strangely as a good benefit for a company of our size and our position. So.
Great, thanks, Will. I think everybody on the panel here is market facing. And I know one thing that we've been wrestling with here at our company is at what point can we shift the conversation from health and safety to something that's more forward-looking from a commercial point of view? And I think we're starting to see a little bit more of that because we're seeing, for example, the brands we cover starting to talk about the future procedures for when you do check into a hotel, what it's going to look like, or when you do go back to the airport, what that experience is going to be like, or when you get back on the airplane, here's the new process for boarding, et cetera. Will, why don't we start with you and just work back? How are you guys thinking about that conversation, and then like how far can you take it without appearing to be tone deaf?
Yeah, I mean, for this industry, I think there's it's hard to do social distancing in a lab, but ultimately being in a lab is probably one of the safest places to be because you're completely covered, you're masked, et cetera. In the office space, we're all doing social distancing. Our market, I think the one thing we worry about is limiting our ability to go after certain disease states because you have regulators that are so deeply focused on, the reaction to COVID and cures and vaccines as they should be. But from a macro standpoint and opening up the economy, I think we all have to think about what the new world looks like. So, if I can go to Ralph's with a face mask, there's a whole bunch of other things I probably should be able to do in the marketplace. And so how do we help those businesses open up? Because, our economy is predicated on multiple businesses. And so to say that, these businesses are quote unquote necessary employees is kind of like short-term thinking for the country and for the world, while at the same time we have to be safe and go about our business at the same time. So, I have a bunch of different ideas. We have a totally different panel if you'd like. I think we should open up golf courses tomorrow, every golf course. But yeah, I think I think what we've run into, and this is my own statement, we've run into a fear factor here. And I think we recognize that this disease does affect some people more adversely than others. And I think we have to sort of contain that and be aware of it and protect it until we get the vaccines out there. But at the same time, we can't slow the economy to a complete stop because we believe there's not strong of a healthcare system to be able to deal with the virus. And I think there is. And I think we've proven that.
John, how are you kind of tackling that question of moving the conversation along from health and safety to something that's more kind of forward-looking and commercial? Kind of balancing that tightrope, if you will.
Yeah, it's hard to make decisions when there's a lot of uncertainty,
Right.
and too often the easiest thing to do is to not make decisions, which is usually the wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a gamble, but with the adaptability, if you gamble right, it's going to pay off. So within product development in the health and wellness space, people are very interested in anything that may help them with anxiety reduction, with helping to sleep, with boosting immune system. So we're starting to look at these opportunities that are clearly large growth areas and figure out which of those are not being well served. So in the longer term, not just in my business, but across health and wellness products, innovation side has really ramped up, and you're going to see a whole lot of new products coming out focusing on these new anxieties that Will is talking about. And there's broader questions across society about how people are going to be spending their money and what they're going to be consuming and what they value. And if anything, there's going to be more of a focus and recognition on mental health. And there's a lot of ways you can treat mental health, whether that's OTC, pharma, cannabis, alcohol, meditation, exercise. And so all of those are almost certainly going to become bigger opportunities, and you're going to see a lot more offerings coming out in those areas. And the companies that exist will have a lot of opportunity because a lot of companies will get wiped out across a lot of those other areas that could be substitutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So here's another question, and so Chris, we'll start with you and go to Diana on this one. We're seeing a lot of change, right? So, and actually, we're seeing a lot of acceleration of things that were coming anyway. So there was a great webinar earlier today with Kurt Delbean from Microsoft with the Dean of Booth. And he talked about the fact that they're seeing digital transformation, essentially 2 years of digital transformation accelerate into 2 months. We heard the same thing from the CFO of the company that makes the plant hamburgers, something foods.
Impossible
Foods.
Yeah.
They had a strategy of moving into the grocery stores, and I think they had 95% of their business in restaurants, and so that strategy that was supposed to be a 2-year rollout. That's been shortened to 2 months. And then one of our clients over at T-Mobile had to move her support agents out of the office into their homes, and they needed to move to the cloud. And that, again, was supposed to be a 2-year project that actually it ended up being a 2-week project. But I think the question is, of the things that are changing, whether it's work at home, distance learning, all the different things that we're doing today, how much of this is permanent and going to be the new normal, and how much of it is we're going to kind of go back to the way things were before? So Chris, what are your thoughts from your world? Yeah.
So I think with regard to entertainment, I mean, yeah, we're seeing it already. And I think one of the biggest things I always point out is, I think for a brief period, Netflix market cap was actually greater than Disney, which would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. Because, Netflix has signed up a huge number of subscribers. So the transition to streaming content, being the predominant way that people consume content is, it's been a long time coming, but that's accelerating. People are cord cutting at a faster pace now. So that's happening. All of that said, that's also, that's COVID related, right? With Disney, a lot of the traditional media companies rely on physical experiences as well. So that obviously they're going to be impacted. So if, like with Disney, you've got cruise ships, theme parks, their event films are all, cost several $100 millions to produce and market. So in order for them to break even and turn a profit, they have to be in theaters. So though you need that theatrical experience. So obviously that's going to be hurt. Not to mention, broadcast and cable advertisers have pulled back a lot, and that's another large source of their revenue. ABC and ESPN. So that's really COVID specific. That said, I think people are definitely people who weren't necessarily using streaming as their main source of consuming content before. I think it's quickly becoming their main source. And I think another thing that's happening, it's also, from the production side of things, and just in terms of, when we'll start seeing maybe a return to where we were before. I think there's a lot of sort of logistics that need to be worked out. So with movie theaters, when are people going to start going back to see movies? I think that's just going to be a gradual process. It's sort of like, air travel. Will every other seat be blocked off so you don't have any touch points and have to interact with people? And with concessions, is it going to be contactless? There's a lot of, steps that need to be.
I always kind of liked having that seat next to me empty at the theater anyway. So this is actually going to work for me.
Air travel, get rid of the middle seat. Why not?
That's right. Diana, have we seen a permanent? I know that JD Power actually published our first study on telehealth last fall, and at that point we were kind of surprised at how slow the adoption was. But I think that we've seen a pretty big spike now. Is that going to be permanent, or are we going to go back to the way things were before?
Yeah, so I'm just going to say, I also like having a seat between me and the next patient when I go to the doctor. So I'm right there with you.
Right.
What's really interesting, you're so right, is that especially when it comes to telehealth, right, and this kind of virtual experience. If I remember correctly, the study was of those that actually tried it, they actually really enjoyed it. Like they found it very positive. And that is very much what we're seeing when it comes to our marketplace. So last year,
and I can confirm that as someone who used telemedicine during all of this, it was amazing, seamless. For some things you might want to go to a doctor in person, but I'm happy doing just telemedicine.
Yeah, and that's so spot on, right? Because for things like maintenance medications, right? So actually, I got an answer or a question asked, but this ties in perfectly for people who have just maintenance medications, whether it's like high cholesterol, blood pressure medication. Those are things people take regularly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we did see an increase early on where people may have converted from monthly or 30-day fills to 90-day fills. So we saw that spike early in March. What we do see fewer, though, are new prescriptions. So things like for lifestyle medications, right? So we're seeing that less because not as many people are going to the doctor for
Right.
in-office visits. When it comes to thinking about, what this means moving forward, there's definitely going to be, I think, more comfort and familiar, to Chris's point, of telehealth being some portion of a patient's experience. That said, it doesn't discount the fact that for certain conditions, we will absolutely, still want to see a doctor in real life. And that's where, too, when we think about then the other aspects of the healthcare experience is, big pharma or the drug manufacturers, right? How are they being impacted? And so what we're seeing as well is for them, they don't have as many reps going into the offices, right? That's already been kind of on the decline. And so what's been really exciting for GoodRx is we are a platform for them to get the word out that they also have discount cards and other saving solutions that they can offer patients that patients may not have known of before. So in that similar way of us bringing transparency and being, something that people can use separate from your insurance or separate from government healthcare, we're able to help brands and drug manufacturers get visibility as well. So if you go to a drug page on GoodRx.com and it's a branded one, those medications tend to be more expensive. So when some of those manufacturers have these alternate solutions to help patients save, this is where patients can learn about it now. So it's really putting it at their fingertips to learn about it, potentially even before or without having go into that doctor's office to see that information.
Okay, thanks, Diana. Yeah, I've got one more question for the panel, and then want to turn it over to the audience for your questions. So again, feel free to type them into either the Q&A box or to raise your hand in the participant box. And so the question is this: what about this experience has made or have you made any kind of permanent changes in your strategy for your business, or perhaps even for the industry, based on kind of the learnings, coming out of this, or given the different outlook that we have today than we had back in January or February? And John, I know that you had prepared a couple of slides, so maybe this would be a good opportunity to walk through those.
I'm happy to. We don't need to go through slides just because I have them, but I mean, there's tactical things that I'm doing differently. So, first of all, this is putting a big dent in growth, and that's different in different markets. So what I put up here is you have California that had been growing at 70+% year on year, which is huge. And that has dropped down drastically. And so people are going to need to adjust to that. But bigger than the top level numbers has been the shift in buying patterns. So what people are buying, their average basket size, people, similar to what Deanna said, are buying less often, but buying more. Everyone is shifting to online buying and picking up, and delivery services are doing great. But if you were a little local dispensary and had no web presence or web ordering, you had to get your act together very quickly, as you say, get up into the cloud in a week instead of next year. So you see tactical things like that as people are making adjustments. That being the case, you see, in this data in Nevada and Colorado, are having a real hard time of it because a lot of those sales are based on tourism as well. So any business in Nevada based on tourism, you're going to be in trouble for a very long time. And so people are obviously pulling back from those kinds of markets where you have those drivers that are no longer there. And so rather than draining the slide, I mean, maybe if you can go on to the next one. For me, tactically, which is everyone knows is a no-brainer, is supply chain and inventory. So I face problems getting ingredients and especially getting packaging and printed materials, a lot of which comes from China or somewhere else. You know, a lot of my ingredients come from India and other places. And so I've been stocking up and also been having difficulty getting things. And so far I'm okay, but I mean, that's a business halting event if you don't have packaging or ingredients to make product. So everyone is bulking up and getting more stock, and you know that'll probably decrease purchasing later on, which is true across a whole lot of categories where people are stocking up. I mean, my other concern for my company personally is talent is a big one. So for Booth, for instance, I'm picking up a couple of interns this summer, and I need to figure out how people are going to do that working remotely. And there's also people who decided not to take the opportunity because of the movement or an in-person component. So I'm also concerned about talent and what that's going to mean more broadly in the industry. I mean, this is based on an agricultural product, and they're still going to have to harvest and trim and dry. And I don't know how they're going to get the labor to be able to do that under the current circumstances. So, so labor and supply chain, really critical. And then, as I said earlier, for companies that are dependent on new infusions of cash, those people are going to go away very quickly.
Great. Thanks, John. Let's see. Will, any permanent changes coming out of this, or is it steady?
I think there's certainly, changes that we don't know about yet. And I'm going to give probably an average answer at best, because I don't think, again, I think we're a long-term story. I think the most important thing is to make sure your employees are safe. And in this facility, I think the most important thing is making sure that we're getting, at least in our process now, clinical trial work done, and making sure our coordination between ourselves and those physicians and nurses that are administering those clinical trials are safe and providing the patients what they need. I think it always does shift scientifically. Again, we're with scientists to try and figure out what the other, how can we help with this existing crisis and what's the next one down the road. So there's always that big picture thinking that can sometimes exist in these scientific journals where it's like, hey, we can really help here. So it's really more about us staying the course, 1,000 points of light, stay the course. That's my George Bush. So I don't think, again, except for the day-to-day stuff, and continue to educate the local officials and regulatory groups to educate and inform our employees on what the most important things we need them to do are, and keeping them safe. And of course, helping those that are on the end of delivering our life-saving therapy and getting them in the position with which to receive it, which is, again, John talked about supply chains. I mean, supply chains are incredibly, incredibly important, and keeping them up and running. It's not just about not seeing toilet paper in a grocery store. I mean, the supply chains are wide and they vary, and that's really important to us. So how we monitor that and making sure that's run efficiently for our specific distribution is important, and that it's not stolen in a sense by other groups that are constrained.
Hey, well, you might be, I know you're not an epidemiologist, but I think you might be closest to this of everybody on the panel, but how should we be thinking about this second wave, this when this thing comes back in the fall?
Yeah. Well, one, I think, again, you have to take a step back, and where I think it was most bothersome or affected us, if you have a pre-existing condition, you've got to continue to be vigilant. If you're above the age of 60, even in the 50s, you've got to be vigilant. I think that living a healthier lifestyle, and Rhodes alluded to it, that really is pretty darn important. I think that if we don't practice social distancing, if we're not, and I'm not saying take extremes, I think that if we're not aware of things like just as simple as washing your hands. Don't ever let that go away. And I know we see the signs on the expressways, but boy, that's such an incredibly important thing. We have to implement those policies and continue those as personal policies in order to make sure the second wave isn't as strong. Because I think the reality is, until we have, I don't think this is like polio where you're going to completely eradicate it, right? The only thing I know about polio is that the president of the United States had it. This has many strains, and there's a lot about it we don't know. But I think if we practice the basic health and hygiene things that we should have from the very beginning, I think we'll see less of a blowback. But again, you have to segment this out. And I know we're boothies and we love data. You have to segment out who is most at risk for this, right? And then again, practice those hygiene policies that matter. But it's real. It's there. I think that we don't know whether temperature affects this or not. I think that's something to kind of look into. So will heat kind of destroy the disease? Are there lower numbers of outbreaks in Palm Springs, for example, where it's 100 and some odd degrees? I don't know. But again, I think practicing those very specific general hygiene policies in our personal selves is really what's going to reduce this risk. But again, there's patient populations out there that will be at risk until we eradicate some of these other things like diabetes, Alzheimer's, or not Alzheimer's, but asthma and other. And
Thanks,
old. I'd like to get rid of old age too, if we could.
Chris, you already talked a little bit about the impact on the entertainment industry, but do you see any kind of permanent changes coming out of this, either for banking or entertainment?
Well, banking, I think, again, talking to Will's point, I mean, in terms of when we're going to sort of return to normal, I think that's probably a year to 18 months is what Dr. Fauci and others are saying. Just until we have a vaccine, it's going to be, in terms of the economy, it's going to be starting and stopping. We'll open up a little bit, and if there's another wave, we might close back up again. So it's really hard to see when, what trends are going to be permanent until, maybe a year or two from now. I mean, any sort of prognosticating, I mean, it could be COVID specific, or it could be something lasting. I mean, who's to say? I think for right now, as a commercial institution, banks by definition are conservative. So, we like to sort of tiptoe into things. So I think in terms of what industries we expose ourselves to, probably, if there's, going to be social gathering or large gatherings are crucial to that. We may not have as much exposure to those industries. So just as a bank, in terms of, the industry itself, I mean, one of the biggest area I think we're seeing affected is production. So film and television production, specifically independent production, where in order to get going, you have to have an insurance policy or what's called a completion guarantee. But unfortunately, with a lot of completion guarantees, you got force majeure, but it didn't really, those policies didn't really anticipate, a global pandemic. So you've got, hundreds of productions around the world that are at a standstill until we have, until people feel safe to go back on set, and until liability is established. If someone gets sick, what happens. So, I think there's a lot of rules and groundworks that need to be, adjusted to a pandemic before we really, get back to normal.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the impact on completion bonds, but you can't. I think that's exactly right. You can't pay off everybody because there's not enough money in the world for that, right? So
yeah.
Diana, we'll finish up with you. So people will have experienced telemedicine now, and it sounds like they're liking it. So that could be accelerating. But any other permanent changes you see coming out of this?
I think something maybe that's been around, but maybe people haven't realized it or has used it as much as just mail order, right? So this isn't novel, but it's an option where people don't actually have to go to the pharmacy to pick up their medication, but they can just get it sent home. But that aside, some of the really great things that we've just done on a regular basis, and this really just speaks to, where we find ourselves today is we continue to be patient-oriented, right? So our patient support team, or who we call patient advocates, they are who we call the front lines of GoodRx. They take the calls from patients who are having a hard time, getting their medication at the pharmacy, or, their health insurance is X dollars, and then they've just discovered GoodRx, and, we're, 4 times lower when it comes to helping them save more and still afford the medication. So that's just ongoing for us. But what's really good too, and really interesting, is as we continue to gather this information, get a sense of, how telehealth is working, how people are filling their prescriptions, we continue to collaborate with and share research on COVID-19 with the FDA, with the Census Bureau, Johns Hopkins, and Harvard. So it's pretty incredible that as we continue to monitor how this really impacts, day-to-day life, let's just say, and then as we do what we can to anticipate the next wave, we just keep an open dialogue so that both from, the kind of academic scientist perspective, data-driven epidemiologists, what we're hearing, at the same time to, we also just stay plugged in with our healthcare providers, right? So with GoodRx, we've established such a great relationship when it comes to doctors and nurses and physician assistants that even during this time, we've done things like send them boxes of snacks, from Snack Nation to the hospitals, to the offices. So, as slammed as they are, we want them to know just how much we appreciate them, not just when things were normal, but especially during this time when they are, the front lines and the essential workers as well. We just want to make sure that whether it be our healthcare providers or our patients that use us every month, we continue to be patient-oriented and really deliver as best we can when it comes to helping people save, right? So if unemployment continues to grow, that could drive more users to GoodRx. So that's something that we'll just continue to monitor going into the summer and the fall.
Thanks, Diana. So look, hey, we're believe it or not, we're coming up on the top of the hour. So that went by fast. Diana and Will and Chris and John, thanks so much for joining us today. Just a quick preview of what's happening next. We do have a couple more of these coming up. So tentatively May 27th, we'll talk about financial markets and bankruptcy. And then we're also looking at a media and leadership event on June 3rd. Also, the OC Club's presenting a real estate roundtable on May 21st. So please sign up for that. A list of all the events for the Alumni for Chicago booth are available on the website listed here. And we also have additional resources for alumni, both in terms of career. And if you want to volunteer to mentor, please email Leanne, who's our West Coast alumni rep from booth. And so thanks for everybody for participating. On behalf of myself and our leadership team, Kiri, my co-president, feel free to get in touch, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks, everyone.